From the onset, I think, let me make it very clear from the African perspective that terrorism and human rights are Africa's greatest challenges to development, to addressing issues of poverty, enhancing governance, ensuring peace, security, and stability on the continent, and also within that, putting the African continent in the context of being a community of states within the international community of states. The issue of terrorism to Africa presents itself a threat to stability. Africa is now moving in the last few years towards enhancing its potential for development, its economy growing at about 7% annually. But the emergence of these potential threats from terrorism have actually undermined that drive that Africa has. And therefore, a conference of this nature is the greatest opportunity for Africa to be able to ensure that the continent remains free of any elements of terrorism. A continent where, if it is addressing challenges relating to terrorism, they need to ensure that the human rights of individuals and also collective rights, because in Africa we have both individual and collective rights, are respected. Secondly, the conference brought out very alarming situation in terms of the state of terrorism globally. You know, if you look at the geographical space that these terrorists are occupying now, at almost 66% is under their control. You know, almost $22 trillion are going towards addressing challenge of terrorism, and therefore denying potential growth areas of the necessary resources that would provide livelihood and growth to African continent. So when you add the totality of these aspects, and also that Africa is growing, but you know the terrorism scenarios is closing the space for Africa. The movement of Africans is becoming very difficult. You know, within the global space, movement of resources is also being restricted. And this in itself is denying the potential of the continent of Africa, you know, to drive its development agenda at full scale. And to us, this conference and the proposed convention that this conference was discussing provides the rightful remedy for Africa's solutions to challenges it's facing now, Africa's solutions and focus to the future of the continent as a continent of stable and development within the broader context. It is unique in the sense that it has closed the many gaps that existed within the overall other conventions relating to the same matter. If you look at the various conventions that are in existence now, you know, they provide a lot of gaps. In other words, if I have to put it in a more simpler way, that with the conventions available and then the aspect of terrorism increasing in itself shows that these instruments have not sufficiently addressed the root causes. They have not sufficiently addressed mechanisms for countering. And this convention that has been proposed by GNRD, it tends to respond to the limitation of the existing instruments. One such important proposal that is within the, first and foremost, even the initial meeting. This is the first meeting of this proposed convention. Never I have been an expert in drafting conventions and treaties. Never in the history of treaty writing that we have seen at the first presentation of the draft convention that you have an audience like the one we had. So that in itself provides an opportunity and the need to show that really for all along the community of states globally has recognized and acknowledged the gap exists. Two is that there are new mechanisms and proposals that have been proposed in here. I'll take one example is the International Council, which would then be determining what elements need to be taken into and so forth. This is a central clearing area. You know, it means that then the geopolitics of individual states gets diluted here. And therefore, the response to this phenomenon will also be a global response. Currently, the response is not global, it's uncoordinated. You know, it's initiated by individual countries and so forth. So there is no collective response within the framework of international law in order to respond to the challenges. So this convention has made various proposals which are unique. They fill the gap of existing. They want to enhance the existing mechanisms, you know, where they are weak, establish some mechanisms where there is a gap. And this combination itself makes it one of the, I think, a sweet convention, I might put it that way. Africa has priority for its security and stability. They have suffered a history of instability. And Africa has a resolve to have Africa that is peaceful and prosperous. And peaceful and prosperous, now they are very, and I must put it this way, that as the continent has progressed, inter-country wars have diminished. In Africa, you not find a country fighting another country now, all right? But what we have is internal elements destabilizing a country in the form that we are discussing, that is terrorism. And therefore, Africa sees this as a greater opportunity to be able to stabilize the continent and exploit our natural resources to the full benefit of its citizens. And there is no other greater challenge that Africa faces now other than the issue of terrorism. And terrorism is de-skilling population. It's displacing population. It's undermining productivity. It's undermining governance. It's threatening human rights promotion and protection. And therefore, it is associated with all negative facets that undermine the collective development aspect of a continent. And I must emphasize, yes, I have a responsibility as a High Commissioner for Africa to mobilize the African continent. And they came in numbers. They are supportive at this conference. And we intend ourselves to have our own encounter on the continent to look at this proposed, so that we come with one voice to the international table to come and support this convention. My message to all participants as we go back to our capitals is that can we table this convention at the various tables of our capitals? Let's get the input and the views of others, and let's make our positions known quickly. For us in Africa, we want to assure you that we will take this to the formal policy-making process within the ministers of foreign affairs of the various spaces that we have. And our call to the other participants is, can they find time to read the convention? Can they communicate their views? Can they help where they can improve? Can they polish where they think we need to polish? So that the next time we'll be meeting, we will all be speaking with one voice.